Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Eddie Marcus here again. And I got a message that I hope each of us that hear this message can relate to it and understand what's really going on. I'm a social scientist. I study people and I conclude certain things about certain people based upon their conduct. And I take the environment, throw that in there to soup it up a little bit. Well, we know that there's a lot of wars going on, which means there's a lot of hate. There's a lot of envy. There's a lot of greed. There's a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of ignorance. All of these things are essentially necessary for war to go on, for people to care so little about each other that they would care enough to kill to have their way. Well, you heard it said that this was not a part of the natural order of things, that people to hate, learned to hate. And for some strange reason, I was thinking about this morning, and it took me back to the beginning, Cain and Abel, Adam and Eve. Well, we don't really know if Adam and Eve were the first people on earth, but they represent the first people. And Cain and Abel represent perhaps the first situation that so offhand that they ended up with death being the result to one. And I think that when we look at the scenario today where you have over half of the people that get married, over half of the people that say they love one another, but over half of the people that can't resist, can't stay away from one another, and who will love each other forever. Well, let's say this is experienced by Adam and Eve. Now, since hate and envy and all that stuff was not part of the vernacular of human beings, I'm going to say that Adam and Eve had a wonderful life. A wonderful life. They were fresh, new, experienced, all new, fresh. And they had a kid, Abel. And Abel was a prize. He was something special. Adam and Eve had an offspring. They had together brought another human being into the world, just like them. Meat, flesh, bone, breathe, see, all of this. And Abel was blessed. He learned after the love, after the care that Adam and Eve expressed between one another. And so the production of love, this is what he saw. This is what he was exposed to. But then later on, having been together and recognizing who you are and what you want, what your desires are, how you feel about yourself and how you feel about another. And so my social scientist thoughts tells me that there became some conflict between Adam and Eve. And there was a lot of disharmony around. And it was around when Cain came into the world. And Cain came into the world seeing a lot of confusion, a lot of the ugly stuff of life, the ugly stuff of being together with someone perhaps too long. There was a lack of harmony, a lack of that love that Abel had experienced. And so Cain grew up seeing something else. He saw a different way of living as opposed to what Abel had seen. And you know the story. They were both supposedly honoring and expressing their love for the understanding of life. One was giving gifts, other giving gifts. One, for some strange reason, gifts was appreciated. Not necessarily that God appreciated anyone's gift any more than the other, but the person who gave the gift was satisfied. And on the other hand, another person gave a gift who was not satisfied. Jealous. For what reason? I don't know. It could have been all of the things that I've mentioned this for, or it could have been a whole bunch of other things. But the outcome was that one boy had learned love and another had learned the opposite. And when given and drawn to the moment, the one who did not know and understand love ended up killing the other. And why was that? That was a result of Adam and Eve and their conduct around this child. Now I understand that people say Cain went someplace else and ended up having a family. Where did this come from? I'm not going to try to explain that because that could offer a whole bunch of other doors open. But I'm explaining this. And so when we see that what a lack of love does, even in this beginning, it didn't stop because the world then was evolving through this Cain and Abel's situation. So I can go on, but I'm thinking that I don't have to. I'm thinking that whatever the situation was that Cain and Abel experienced as a result of living with their parents, Adam and Eve, is an expression of the things that happen in the world today. And having an affection or disaffection brings you to a point of contention where something must be done. It is my understanding as a social scientist, and one has reverence for God, the power that created all existence, must really be sad at the outcome of what's happening to humankind. Well, there have been stories that came along that says God sent a special child, a special creation to this earth, and it was to show the people that there was something else. The focus was not to be on just each other per se, to the extent that they could end up hating each other because that's what they would do, because they're different. But to put their focus on a power was superior to theirs. And that was to focus on another power that they could not see but understood because they were walking on the earth of that power. They were eating the food that is a result of that power. And that rather than focusing on those things that they focused on that brought them and separated them, they should focus on something that would bring them together. And that was to recognize and honor God, to honor God. And in the middle of all the separation, in the middle of all the evil, in the middle of all the hate, in the middle of all the animosity that was being experienced by the people, this young one came down focused, not on people per se, but on being a representation of the power that the people could not see. A truth, what you might call the big God and the Son of God. And he ended up getting killed by the same hate, the same evilness that killed Abel. But the message was brought. And the message was to free people by letting them know that with love, these things would not happen. And so there had to be a message, there had to be a process whereby this, my friend, would not happen. But one of the messages that was given is that people should love, that they should love one another, and they should love each other as they would want the other to love them back. And when people are together, you can't necessarily say that this is going to happen because you're talking about individuals. But the method was that what was required of the individual is necessarily required of the collective. So, as a community, you should protect one another by caring for one another and making sure that any pain, any suffering that anyone experiences, as best you can, do what is necessary to settle that situation. And so, what I see today is that when the message was, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," wherever one is suffering, commit yourself to end that suffering as opposed to taking advantage of that suffering. Because everybody want to just rise. How many want to make sure that no one stays behind by being stepped on and allowing others to rise while they are being stepped on? Wow, what a hell of a message. Or should I say a divine message? Well, this social scientist says that as we would want to live a happy, wonderful, fantastic life as an individual, we should engage ourselves to make sure that every individual can live a fantastic, wonderful life by making sure that whatever is required for one to live a fantastic, wonderful life is available to everyone. In other words, if Adam and Eve had a problem that caused us all of the hell that Cain had to witness, it would have been wonderful. I mean, wonderful, absolutely wonderful, if Adam and Eve could have had an outlet where they wouldn't have to engage and create all of that animosity, but they could maybe separate, go two different ways. And forever or for a short period of time, it doesn't matter, as long as love was experienced between the two. To make a long story short, as a social scientist and as one that believes in love, I'm talking about the kind of love that you want to do for others the same as you have others do for you. You want it to be free, prosperous, and happy, fulfilled, and satisfied. We should make a change in our society, in our system. The system that we live in has been terrible. It has caused, every evil that can actually exist to exist. And so you might say, what is it that we can do? How can we evolve to express the kind of love that would bring peace and harmony? How can we do that? Well, one way is to make sure that the ants don't overwhelm you. Make sure that whatever you had together with one is not lost when you are by yourself. You can be alone and loved, and at the same time, love everybody else. Why? Because you don't have any reason to hate. You don't have any reason to just depend on another, because that will fail. And when what you're depending on doesn't work, then all kinds of stuff break loose. But if you can depend on yourself and respect and honor yourself, that might enable you to care about the person across the street or down the hall the same way as you care about yourself. Why? Because you don't necessarily need them. You don't necessarily have to build your life on them. But in loving yourself, it really means loving others, because you'll find out just how much you need one another. When I say need one another, I'm talking about to enjoy your own life. To enjoy your own life. What good is talking if you have no one to talk to? What good is eating if you don't have anyone to share it with? But you recognize that eating is good and there's nothing that's preventing you from eating. And so the opportunity to eat with others in peace is fine, because it doesn't take away your ability to eat in peace. And let's go back to the real nitty gritty. Let's say making love. I find out that a lot of people, relationships fall apart because of making love. That's because they put so much of making love on others. The greatest way to make love is to make love to yourself. To make love to yourself means you don't need anyone else to make love to. To make love with someone else is just to bring in another human being, if that's the result. Produce, procreate. But it is my desire to expose the evils. And it is my desire to share what eliminates that evil. And so I engage and ask everybody that hears my voice to let us work together to make sure that we have a wonderful life as individuals. And having a wonderful life as an individual allows us, and it teaches us how we should treat one another, because that's the same way we want others to treat us. And so we should engage ourselves in life to not just receive, but to give. And that is to participate in the process of life by identifying that which we truly love as a service to ourselves and a service to one another. And when we really love it, we will receive the joy of really exercising it. And by doing what we love and receive the joy that comes from the creator of the earth, we have received what the world can't give and the world can't take away. And so while we're out there doing what we love doing, we're actually creating enough of that love that we love doing that it's overflowing from us, and it's there in such an abundance that no one would ever have to be denied any of the love that we ourselves have and which we are giving to the world. That would allow for our needs, our wants, and our desires to be met, because we have so many different needs, wants, and desires, but doesn't matter. We're engaged in that which we love. And there are people who replicate, there are people who desire what the same things that we desire, like food. Everybody wants food. And so there's enough of everything. We don't have to suffer for a lack of food or clothing or shelter, education or healthcare, transportation, or anything that comes to your mind, that the resources that are given to us free by the God that gave us the earth would allow us to cause the manifestation thereof, which would allow us to live in peace and be prosperous and free and joyous and happy, fulfilled, and to live our lives, to live our lives, our individual lives. And when we can live our individual lives, we will recognize, my friend, that we can live a collective life. That would have been quite effective for Cain and Abel. Well, the same thing that happened then is happening today because we have not fixed the situation. And we have not fixed the situation because we have not accepted the ways. Anyone that comes to show us the way usually gets killed. And that is a good sign. That is a wonderful sign. Sad to say, but it is a sign to the power that put us here that we refuse to be a part of the problem. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us change our system. We recognize that our system is associated and interconnected with all the systems of the earth, but we are only responsible for what? For ourselves as individuals? That's first. And once we can deal with that, then we can deal with the collective, our nation. And once our nation is developed righteously, then we can extend ourselves to deal with the rest of other nations. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen right away. It might take time because just like Abel was okay, Cain was different. And just because I say I'm righteous, America is different. And if America and I become one and we are all together righteous, that doesn't mean that the next nation is going to be the same. But what was good for the gander is good for the goose. And that is our teaching mechanism. So if you want to say what was wrong with Adam and Eve that allowed them to create a Cain and Abel, what is wrong with you that allowed you to create an America, a United States of America? Well, when you know, then you can show by fixing it. I know this doesn't make any sense to you, but it came to me and I just wanted to share it with you because you're smart. And what I left out, you can figure out because it's a us and not just a me. Thank you.